You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around, and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello. This is Dr. Alex. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again for another installment of our Podclass series. This is the advanced version, so welcome. I was tempted to call it like 102, but I think advanced Podclasses is the best because then we can call them AP classes. So today we are going to delve into cortisol, which is a big subject, but a really important determinant of how we actually feel on a daily basis, our energy levels, and all of that. So this is going to be huge. Now, you'll notice that in the order of these pod classes, we already talked about DHEA. And I do hope that you're going in order because all of these are going to build on one another. But we said in that pod class that DHEA is kind of like the gas in the tank of the adrenals. How much gas is actually left as far as adrenal reserves go? And so the state of that really tells us about how the adrenals are doing in this snapshot of life. Now, cortisol is a little bit more functional in that DHEA won't change day to day. It kind of stays for that season of life. Of course, we can change like when people fall off the hormone cliff, right? Like Megan postpartum, her DHEA certainly changed very quickly as she was falling off that cliff, and it contributed to it. But that's kind of the hormone cliff feeling. Now, cortisol changes day to day and depending on what we're doing. So this is where I look at the functionality of the adrenals in terms of what are they actually creating in real time. So there are 2 aspects of cortisol that we need to know about. And again, this is where when people just get a serum cortisol or even just the saliva cortisol, it is just one snapshot and does not give us an accurate understanding of the relationship between the cortisol that got made and the cortisol that got used. If it's saliva, we only then talked about what got used. That gives us no information about what got made. And the same is true about blood. That's what was used, not about what was made. And so when we get urine metabolites, it's really interesting. And again, this is why we get the Dutch for our ladies, because we need to know both. Now, Metabolize cortisol is what we call it when we refer to the total cortisol made by the adrenals that day. So metabolize cortisol, it's called that because a certain amount of cortisol gets made. There's only 2 metabolites that cortisol can get broken down into, and they show up in the urine. That's why on the Dutch, we can get a number that represents the total amount made. But that does not tell us what was used. There's a different number for that. But that's why we like this test so much, is because we can actually see what did the brain, given all the rest of it, what did the brain tell the adrenals to make in terms of cortisol, and what did they actually make? What were they capable of making? And so a lot of times people have, a certain amount of cortisol that they made, but the problem in modern humans is that they're not regulated with what they actually use out of that total amount. And that on the Dutch that's the number that we get is the 24-hour free cortisol. And that free cortisol really represents what ended up in our bloodstream to be used. Of course, to go a level deeper, there's what we put into the bloodstream and how fast we cleared it out of the bloodstream. So both of those need to be considered. Which one was it? But it's really this relationship between total made and what's going to be used that determines a lot of how we feel day to day as well. And so, of course, that has to do with weight loss resistance. Those of you who are holding on to stubborn belly fat and cellulite and just feel like you're starving yourself and can't lose any weight and you keep going keto and low carb, all of that is because of cortisol dysregulation. So the body keeps a really tight hold on total made and what it plans to use. Unfortunately, for a lot of us modern humans, that relationship between total made and what we use in the blood has been broken by other imbalances. And that's why we have low energy, the weight loss, resistance, poor sleep. Maybe we're crabby. That has to do with blood sugar regulation. We get hangry. All of this stuff has to do with the lack of preservation between what the impulse to make cortisol that the body got and then the impulse to use cortisol that the body got. And so because of that, the body really wants a very tight control over this. And anytime we have cortisol dysregulation, it generally will cause us symptoms so that we know, the body, that's just its way of telling us something's up. So it causes symptoms, and then those symptoms cause us to change what we're doing, hopefully. But unfortunately, now we've kind of gotten into a system where a lot of what we are told in the world isn't actually supporting this cortisol balance. And so it's not helping. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. And of course, that's why we want to get this information out there as widely as humanly possible, because it's miserable trying to out willpower or self-control your way to weight loss when it's literally your body trying to protect you. Now, cortisol dysregulation, the reason it leads to belly fat is because the body has two alarm mechanisms in the body. There are stress neurotransmitters inside the nervous system, and there's cortisol, and that's the longer term. So, as you can imagine, if one of our alarm systems is dysregulated in the body, essentially that's an alarm system that's down. Now the body is going to say, we really have no mechanism to protect ourselves. We might as well pad the internal organs with some fat so that we get a little protection from getting mauled by the bear or whatever it is. And of course, our body hasn't kept up with the rate of modern life change that we have. And so unfortunately, our bodies are still in getting chased by a tiger mode when we're living a life that has nothing to do with tigers and, stress from work and social media and the realities of modern living are really, really high. And so this is where so many of us have started dealing with the problems caused by cortisol dysregulation, but because it's so common, we look around and we say, well, it must just be, this is what happens as we get older, or this must just be perimenopause, this must be what it's like. So this really, really crucial to have that understanding of when something's wrong in the system, we are going to have a lot of symptoms by design, and we have to appropriately address those concerns as far as the body is letting us know about so that it gets a handle on it. So cortisol dysregulation, that's probably the most common thing to happen. Now, someone can have their brain saying make a lot of cortisol, and then they can be balanced and they're using a lot. That still causes problems. Now, they could be balanced and they're both low. That still causes problems. So no matter, which way you fall, whether it's dysregulation and the dials just don't point in the same direction, or they're too high and too low, any one of those things will cause problems because, again, if we have an alarm system of the body that's down, lots of symptoms will ensue. The tricky thing about cortisol dysregulation, especially, is that you can't turn up a knob or down a knob without impacting the other one. So when the body isn't regulated in terms of total MAID and what it plans to use, then we have to be really cautious about impacting. People will go nuts on like the licorice root and stuff like that. But really, without this information, it's really not safe to be mucking around with that kind of stuff, because we need to know both of these decision processes in the body and then deal with them appropriately. Now, a lot of what happens or the reasons that underlie cortisol dysregulation or a cortisol problem is actually because we have another imbalance that is sending out a competing signal. Now the body is confused. The brain's saying, don't make very much, but then we have a gut infection that keeps triggering cortisol release from the adrenals, and now we're using a bunch, but not making a lot, right? These are kind of common things to have happen, and this is where we really need the balance between both of them to understand what imbalances are happening and how we can impact them.
Quick interruption to personally invite you to come join us for our super exciting and incredibly actionable free video training series coming up.
It's a 3-part series where we cover everything hormone related that you ever wanted to know about. We share top 5 favorite hormone helpers, talk through common hormonal imbalances, and discuss setting yourself up for success. Go to zestyginger.com/blueprint to sign up, or click the link in the show notes below. We can't wait to hang out with you.
Go do it now and grab a friend. We'll see you there.
Some of the most common reasons that change cortisol output and creation are, trauma. Trauma will change both what the brain tells the adrenals to make, but it will also change utilization of cortisol. Blood sugar regulation problems also fall into that category. Thyroid imbalances will worsen this kind of thing. Again, that can be from the top, though. It's not necessarily coming from the thyroid. It can be the hypothalamus sending the wrong signal to the thyroid. Now the thyroid is just another thing that's off, and the cortisol gets messed up. So they all can work in a circle. And then another thing is pathogens. So either gut pathogens, gut overgrowths, or systemic pathogens and overgrowths, or like Lyme, mold, EBV, all the viruses, that kind of stuff, all changes the control. And so these are the deeper digging things that we have to go after to figure out why the cortisol is messed up in the first place. So yes, unfortunately, cortisol isn't one of those things that we get to be like, oh, here's what's off, take some stuff and there you go, it'll be fixed. No, we actually have to figure out which of these categories someone has. Like, do they have trauma and a gut overgrowth like SIBO? Or do they have, a exposure to mold and they have nutritional deficiencies leading to blood sugar problems? So all of these things have to be considered. And that is going to be on the next podcast. We are going to talk more about some of these underlying issues and what can happen, especially for the relationship between the cells of the body being active and what the cortisol is doing. So that is up next, but I hope you guys found that helpful. This is, a really, truly deep way to look at cortisol imbalances, because again, this is not like mucking around with, oh, let's just get the body to make more cortisol. No, the thing that we really have to ask is, why is the body doing this? And if we dig deep enough into the root causes, that's how we can get someone on the right path out of the hole they're in, and then, at a rate where they're improving And that's really the long-lasting change. Otherwise, you have probably already sadly had the experience where you've been going to people, they keep finding stuff, giving you things, but there's no end in sight. Things are not getting better, and this is where we have to go back far enough, and I think of it in dominoes. We have to go back to the original domino knocking things off. I could set that fourth domino up 10 million times, but if someone keeps hitting that first domino, it's going to keep falling. So this is where we're going to go next into the cortisol discussion, and especially for that blood sugar tissue happiness story, that's going to be next. So thank you so much as always for hopping by, and I will see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare, and we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads, and we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.